That's one of the issues that people have in this process of awakening is that they can't shake off the person. You know, it's the person not knowing it's being the person. Look at it this way. There's only two possibilities here. You're either what you really are or you're not. Right? It's not like there's 10 choices, right? You're either what you really are or you're not. And where this begins for almost everybody is you're not. Not only are you not who you really are, but you have been so practiced and so habitual in being that which you're not, that you don't know how not to be it. You don't know how not to speak from it. You don't know how not to operate from there. And so the only thing that you can see as a possibility is this happens without your even recognizing it. Or you may recognize it, but it gets convoluted. In other words, you either don't recognize that you're being Bob trying not to be Bob, right? Being the person trying not to be the person, but you don't realize you're doing that. You speak the way that you just spoke. It's as if you could not be who you're being when you're speaking, right? Or you recognize that you're being the person, and then you speak as the person, wanting to understand, because that's what the person does. The person wants to understand more, right? Because obviously, and this is one of the things that makes dealing with answering questions a problem, because who would ask a question, you see? Who would ask a question? If there's two possibilities, and one of those possibilities is you know who you are. If you know who you are, would you have a question about it?
Right, you would not.
No.
It has to be the person.
Has to be the person, right? So when the person's asking a question, then you have to look and see, well, what's the person up to? If the person is interested in experiencing who they really are, and they're asking a question, they must believe that somehow answers to questions is going to make a difference.
Right.
They must somehow believe that if I understand this more, and it's understandable that that's the way it goes, because in the normal course of events, that's the way it is, right? You as a person, you learn something, and when you learn it, the more you understand it, the more you know it, the more you've learned it, the more you have remembered it, the more you practiced it, then that's how you became a person, right? That's how you became a person. You little by little, you learned it, you practiced being Bob. The first time, when you were really early on being Bob, your mother might have pinned your name to your shirt, so because if somebody asked you if you're a little kid, what's your name, you might say boy, right? And so you're learning to be Bob, right? A little by little, you learn more and more about Bob until Bobness has taken over. Now you're being Bob. You're not just learning how to be Bob, you are Bob now. Now when you look in the mirror, you immediately see Bob. When you speak, it's Bob speaking, right? When you think, it's Bob thinking. When you have emotions, Bob's having emotions. When you do something, Bob's doing it, right? The whole thing gets to a very complete point, and then you see everything around you in relationship to Bob, in relationship to the person. So there's me, and there's the world. I'm a person, that's not me, this is me. Other people aren't me, I am me. I have, the things around me are mine, right? When you're about 2 years old, right, it starts to be, that's mine, right? So this whole thing develops, and it becomes very sophisticated, and as it develops into its sophisticated form, it becomes neurotic. Right? Around the time when you go into early adolescence, right? You start becoming self-conscious, right? How do I look? You know, are the girls think that I'm attractive? Do I think I'm attractive? How am I coming across? You know, what do people think about me? Right? This is the neurosis beginning to happen, right? And then as you become a teenager and adult, you refine your neurosis. You figure out what you're good at. You figure out how to get along in the world, right? You come up with some kind of scheme, some kind of strategy. Well, I might not be that physically attractive, but I'll be smart, right? Or I'm not that smart, but I'll be physically attractive, right? You come up with some plan or how you're going to make it in the world, right? Because you have to make it in the world because you're separate from the rest of the world, and right away that creates competition. So I might not be smart, or I may not be attractive, but I'll work hard and make a lot of money, and that's how I'll make it in the world, right? Of course, this is what causes all of the problems that we have. But going back to where we started to talk about this is so much the stripes on the zebra that to be what you actually are, given how far down the road you are in terms of what you're not, is like you have to change the stripes on yourself as a zebra. That's how, and so, and that's the difficulty with this, because the orientation to identifying with the body and the orientation to identifying with the person is so complete that you don't know what to say to be who you are. You don't know how to you don't know how to express that, because the brain keeps using your mouth to talk, and it's using your mouth to talk with the orientation it has as you as a person. I've seen this, and if you remain committed to this process of self-realization, which in and of itself is a challenge, right? Because how long are you going to be able to put up with this? How long are you going to be able to put up with practicing meditation and listening to teachers talk and trying to experience this possibility that you understand that offers freedom and liberation and so forth? How are you going to be able to, how long can you put up with that before it becomes too frustrating, or before you go away, or you may see if you can find the right teacher, right, that can be the one that lights you up, that turns you on, that enlightens you. People go through all kinds of trips about it, right? They try and do more meditation, they go to retreats, they read more books. The life of the Buddha is a story about the whole thing. I mean, he did very extreme things. He almost killed himself, starving himself and everything, and none of it worked. But even though that's the case, when people come into contact with this message, that's the path they go down for the most part, because they don't know how to do it any other way. And so you find yourself doing this. And I've seen people suffer the process, people have come to me after reading my books, have come to me, and I know when they come to me, they're coming to me because to see if I can light them up, to see if I can do the magic, right? Somehow that they can then experience what they understand me to be talking about. And of course, it's very important for me in the very beginning, when I talk to people about that, to make it clear to them that I cannot do that. No one can do that. But a lot of times, even though I say that doesn't matter. They believe that I'm just saying that. They probably can do that, So it's a tricky process. The whole thing becomes a tricky process. But I can tell you that there are things that make a difference in terms of how this realization occurs. And one of them that is clear to me is that you have to have an attitude about it that is unwavering. In other words, you have to be willing to take on the realization of who you are with an absolute commitment. That's something that is evident to me. It's something that was true for me in my own experience. It's something that seems to be there when people wake up. You know, in Eckhart Tolle's case, for example, he was about to kill himself. How absolute commitment can you have, right? That's a pretty absolute commitment, right? You're about to kill yourself. In the case of Ramana Maharshi, you know, he thought he was dying when he woke up. At first he was terrified of death, and then he lied down on the floor and was trying to kind of understand it, and then he got into it to the point where he thought he was really dying, right? So that's a pretty big commitment, right? To be committed to the idea that you're dying and that you're just going to let that happen. Of course, there's nothing you can do about it. So that's one thing that I think is necessary. But the thing that I would, the other thing that I would suggest to you doesn't work is to ask questions that are coming from the person. Like, you know, well, suppose this, suppose that, you know, help me clarify these things, you know. That's all just stuff that's coming from the person. So one of the things that can make a difference is to pay attention to what's going on in your mental state, with the voice in your head and in your emotions and in your behavior, to pay attention to what's going on there, to see if you can see the person, to see if you can see that this is the person. I speak about that in terms of recognizing your negative reactions, because that's something that's probably the easiest thing to notice, right? That's when you're the craziest, right? When you're angry and you're in a negative state and you say things that are crazy and you do things that are destructive and so forth. But what it's going to take to really come out of the dream, what's going to take to come out of the hypnosis, is to be able to pay attention to that person in the more subtle forms. For example, to pay attention to the way you are in relationship to getting attention, the way when your ego's being massaged, you know, when something's happening where you say, oh, this is makes me look good, you know, to see that is the person as well, right? Right? And then to notice the person, how the person avoids things that might make them look bad, right? People often avoid asking questions because they're afraid they're going to look bad. That's the person. That's the person. If you pay attention, you can really start to see the person pretty consistently. And when you're seeing the person pretty consistently, that will give you the opportunity to stop identifying that as you, right? Stop identifying that as you. If I can see it, if I can see my body, I must not be my body. If I can see the person, it's a little more subtle than the body because it's not material, right? It's not physical. But if I can see the person, then I can see I'm not the person. I must not be the person because I can see the person. I can see the person the way the person is thinking. I can see the way the person is behaving. And if I can see that, then I must not be that. This is a way to approach this that I think gives you more of a possibility of waking up. And the reason I say that is because, and Paul Hederman says this as well, the reason I say that is because I can't say to you that the way to wake up is to realize who you really are, right? And then to just be that, and when you're being that, you'll be awake. And the reason I can't say that is because that's already happening, and that hasn't worked, right? You already are who you are, and that hasn't worked, right? And the reason it hasn't worked is because you're relating to that from the viewpoint of a person, and the person can only recognize things that are things. Right? So what happens is you're all the time you're looking through the person. I mean, you're looking through the awareness. You're looking from the awareness. You're looking as the awareness, right? And not noticing it. Has to be true, right?
Well, yes.
You are the awareness. You're being the awareness. You're seeing from the awareness. It's looking through your eyes. It's hearing through your ears, right? But what gets put on top of that is the idea that I am a person. That's looking through my eyes. That's what's hearing with my ears. So it's the most obvious thing there is, and you're looking past it all the time. You're looking past it all the time. And so if you can start to see that, if you can start to notice the looking past it, right, then the possibility of relaxing, right, because the recognition and the realization of who you are is something that you relax into. Obviously, there's nothing for you to do, right? Right, there's obviously nothing, there's no question that's going to give you the answer to it. There's no action that you can take that's going to cause it to be true. So at some point, you just give up and you relax. This is what a lot of the teachers say, let go. Just relax. Just relax and allow yourself to be what you already are, and in the being of it, it will reveal itself to you. In the being of it. Because the thing that makes it even more of a conundrum, right, is that even when you don't know who you are who you are. Even when you're identifying yourself as a person, the person is the self. Why? Because there isn't anything else, right? But the person is being the self undercover. But it doesn't know it's being the self undercover. So it only thinks that its undercover version of itself is all there is. That's the way it's been living its life for a long time, right? So it's got to come out from being undercover. Yeah, so because you see, part of what you're saying is accurate. It's because you could say to me, well, if you're telling me asking questions is a dead end, right? It's not going to accomplish anything, right? Then why do you ask people if they have any questions, right? And the answer to that question is, I don't know what else to do. You know what I mean? Ramana Maharshi, in the beginning, when he started to have people come to him, he would just sit there. He would just sit there. And he was so completely in the experience and the energy of the reality of himself, that even though he just sat there, if he made eye contact with some people who were really ready to wake up, right, they could, just by looking at him, they could wake up. Right? Plus, he had such a strong energy field. You know, he had such a strong energy field that, and you can see this in, I think David Godman talks about this in one of his videos, that you can look at some of the film of him sitting, and you can see his head bobbing, right? And what David Godman says about that is that he didn't have Parkinson's, that the energy field, his chi, his energy field of his body was so intense that it would vibrate his head when he was sitting still. And so there are people who believe that because of the intensity of the consciousness, of the energy of consciousness that manifested in him, right, that he could, that energy could actually move people into an experience of realization. But not for most people. Most people, see, it's important to understand this so you know what you're getting into here. Most people who traveled to India, who went to visit Ramana Maharshi and sat at his feet and sat with him day after day in his meeting hall, and people who asked him questions, people who he gave answers to questions, most of the people who went there to wake up and experience self-realization did not have that experience. And they were being with a guy who was supposed to be one of the most powerful expressions of this that has ever lived. So on the one hand, you can look at it that way and say, well, that's a pretty tall order. You know, I don't know how realistic it would be for me to think that I can wake up, right? But at the same time, that's the case, you are already awake. Because if you were aware of who you are, you would not have a question. Because that's the whole point here, isn't it? I think. I mean, that's what I thought. That's what I was thinking we were doing here. And if that's the case, if you know who you are, how could you have a question? See, if you know who you are, you wouldn't have a question. You would have an answer. Right? You would have the answers. Right. And that's one of the ways that people are recognized in terms of being self-realized, is that, you know, they can speak from there in a very clear way, right? But the thing is this, you know, given what this is about and given what it has to offer, as far as I'm concerned, you've got to give it everything. You've got to give it your all. Given what it has to offer, you've got to give it your all. And one of the ways that you can tell whether the probability exists for you to wake up in this life is how much of yourself you give to this. Because you have to remember, the idea that you have of a person is trying to keep you off the track. It's trying to keep you in that identity, right? So therefore, most of the people who come across this find themselves somewhere in the process, but not completely given themselves to this in such a way that it increases the probability that they're going to wake up. And they just keep spinning their wheels, with the idea that somewhere along the line, maybe if they met the right guru or, they got Sakti pot. Some people who follow the Kundalini gurus like Swami Muktananda believe that if he touched them, that they had this belief within that particular understanding that he could touch you and just touch you and wake you up by touching you. When you ask that question, it's the person asking the question, you see. How do I live in that moment? And the answer to that question, which isn't going to help you, is you are living in that. But it's not going to help you. It can't help you because if you're asking that question, you must not have that experience. You see the dilemma? Somewhere along the line, I think it is helpful for people. I think it is helpful for people to realize that right now, you are experiencing who you are. That's something that I think is very important for you to keep coming back to. Right now, you are experiencing who you are, right? The idea that you have about it, right, about who you are and how to experience that and who you're being when you're not experiencing that, that's all the stuff that's in the way. It's just for most people, they find it impossible not to try to be what they already are. Most people find it impossible not to try to be what they already are. And yet, most of the teachers that I've heard talk about it say that that you have to give up. You have to give that up. You have to totally give up trying to be who you already are. Completely surrender to it and don't allow yourself to keep trying to do it. Notice if you do and stop. And stop. Just pay attention. It's there. It's there. It's there. So, and it's possible for you to experience it. Why? Because you are experiencing it. Right? But you're not noticing that you're experiencing it because you're completely preoccupied with this identity that keeps getting manufactured by thinking. That's what's happening. And it's insidious because, as I said the other day, we live in a world where almost everybody is 100% in the idea that the reality that they're experiencing is the true one, right? 100% that they are their body, 100% that they are a person. And that's what you move around in. So that doesn't help, does it? It's a filter that is constantly operating, right? It's constantly operating. It's constantly taking the data that's coming in and processing it so that by the time it gets to you, it's the person. There was one of the gurus that died not that long ago, and he used to say that all the time. The body's the problem. Rupert says that too, that the biggest form of identification that we have is the body, and therefore we consider ourselves to be physical, and we're really completely oriented into that. And so a lot of his guided meditations are about seeing the illusion that you're a body.